They laughed at me over roasted carrots and red wine, over the clink of crystal I had polished with my own hands, over the soft breath of my baby sleeping upstairs. "Too bad your baby looks nothing like your husband," my sister-in-law said, slicing the evening in half. The room went so quiet, I could hear the grandfather clock miscount a second, and then my husband let out that weak, eager laugh he uses when he wants to belong. "Maybe she has a secret," he said, and somewhere inside my chest, something small and faithful died without a sound. I didn't cry, I didn't plead. I stood up the chair legs, whispering on the hardwood like a warning, and I walked to our bedroom where my jewelry box waited with a white envelope tucked beneath the pearls he gave me for our second anniversary. The paper felt heavier than paper should, like truth does when you've carried it for months. When I came back, all their eyes were the same color of curious. I put the envelope in front of him. "Since we're sharing secrets," I said, and the chandelier made a little starburst in his water glass, as if the room itself leaned in to listen. I wasn't always this composed. I'm Olivia, 31, a woman who learned to cook her mother-in-law's roast the way her husband likes it, then learned how to read the way he looks at his son. The first time I saw that look, George was 3 days old, and the fluorescent lights in the hospital hummed like bees. My husband traced our baby's nose as if it were a crime scene, not a miracle. "Sharp," he murmured like an accusation that didn't yet know its name. From that night on, I collected moments like slivers. His silences that thickened when friends said, "He's got your eyes." His careful way of bathing our son, as if handling borrowed property. His casual questions about timing, that arrived with the weather and left splinters behind. Small things easy to excuse. You can learn to make tea around the broken handle of a cup if you tell yourself it was always meant to be held that way. But the body knows. The heart keeps a ledger. On a Tuesday in July, when the sun drew chalk lines across our kitchen floor and my son napped with one fist curled like a comma, I typed "paternity testing clinic" official paperwork into the search bar with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. I didn't want a cute kit in a cheery box. I wanted a lab that smelled like bleach and proof. Riverside Genetics was 43 minutes away if you took the back road past the nursery, where last spring I bought rosemary for the roast everyone would praise and then use to season their jokes. The doctor had kind eyes and a serious voice. "Are you sure?" she asked, and I surprised us both by saying yes without stuttering. I collected strands of my son's hair from his baby brush and scraped my husband's toothbrush before dawn, and I hated all of it. I hated that trust had become a science project, that marriage had turned me into a detective, that love could sit so quietly beside suspicion at the same table and pretend to bless the food. 2 weeks stretched like wire. Every morning I opened the mailbox as if it could bite me. Every night I folded tiny pajamas with soldierly precision, as if neatness could protect us. When the envelope came, I tore it open at the kitchen counter, where the sunlight always makes the marble look like clean, honest snow. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I sank to the floor and sat among the bills as if I were newly invented. Relief arrived, first sweet and devastating. And then came a fury so white and complete, I could have lit the whole street with it. It wasn't only that I'd been doubted, it was that my baby had been weighed against gossip and found questionable. It was that a woman who spent 8 hours slow-cooking pot roast to be worthy of a family name had been asked to offer her son up for authentication, as if love were a club that required proof at the door. So I made copies on heavy paper with seals that flash under light. I put one in the bank and one with our insurance and this one beneath the pearls. I carried that envelope inside my days like a flint. Every time someone said George didn't look like his father, I touched the drawer in my mind where the proof lived and felt my spine remember its job. At dinner, after Daisy smiled like a blade, after my husband decided that fitting in mattered more than standing by me, I walked down the hall and opened the jewelry box. The pearls were smooth as apologies I no longer wanted. When I came back, they were all still frozen in their places. My mother-in-law with her glass tilted and a tremor starting. My father-in-law cutting meat in tiny pieces like he could make the moment smaller. my cousin-in-law's eyes bright with the hunger of a person who loves witnessing other people's car crashes. My husband folded his napkin into smaller and smaller squares until his fingertips shook. "Open it," I said. He slid a finger under the flap, all arrogance and then all airlessness. The letterhead hit him first, and I watched 20 years of his easy confidence drain like color from a photograph in sun. He read the first line, then the second, then the first again, as if repetition could conjure an alternate ending. His mouth opened and closed. His throat worked. The paper rattled. And I, holding the steadiness I had purchased with 2 weeks of fear and a lifetime of patience, took my place behind his chair, close enough that he could feel the heat of me, and far enough that he would have to turn his head to find my face. My husband's hands shook as he tried to fold the letter back into its envelope, as if tucking truth into paper could unmake it. But the words had already burned themselves across every face at that table. My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed, like she had swallowed fire, and couldn't decide whether to scream or swallow it. My sister-in-law, who had thrown the first knife, now looked down at her plate as though mashed potatoes could rescue her. My father-in-law set down his fork carefully like a man defusing a bomb, but his eyes never left me. The silence stretched, and in that silence I realized I was not ashamed. For years I had lived as if shame were stitched into my apron strings, bending myself to fit the picture of the perfect wife and perfect mother they demanded. But that night, when the only sound was the chandelier humming and my baby stirring upstairs, I felt a clean, terrifying freedom. My husband finally looked up at me. "Olivia, you went behind my back." His voice cracked not with rage but with disbelief. He still thought betrayal was mine, not his. I leaned closer. "You doubted your own child. You let them laugh at me at him. What choice did you give me?" My words were calm, but they carried every sleepless night, every whispered rumor, every wound I had pressed into silence. And then came the part I hadn't planned. Because revenge is not just about the strike, it is about the aftershock. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping like thunder. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. That was when something inside me broke completely. Not when they laughed. Not when I had to test my baby's blood to prove his existence. But in that moment when his pride mattered more to him than my humiliation, I felt the last tie snap. "I embarrassed you." I laughed, the sound startling even me. "No. You embarrassed yourself the moment you doubted me, the moment you chose their whispers over my truth." My father-in-law cleared his throat, an old man's attempt at authority. "Olivia, maybe we can." But I cut him off with a glance. I was done playing the polite daughter-in-law. "Don't. Not one word. You all sat here and laughed while I carried the weight of your cruelty." My eyes swept the table. "Do you know what that does to a woman? To a mother?" For once, no one answered. They had always thought I was the quiet one, the agreeable one. They had mistaken my silence for weakness, but silence is only the echo before the storm. I turned to my husband, who was still staring at the paper like it might rearrange itself into something kinder. "I loved you," I whispered. "God, I loved you enough to tear myself apart to be who you needed. But you," I gestured at the letter, "you tore us apart with your doubt." He tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. He looked smaller to me than he ever had before, like a man shrunk by the weight of his own choices. And in that shrinking, I saw my future so clearly, a lifetime of trying to prove myself to people who would never see me, never believe me, never honor me. So I walked to the crib upstairs where my son stirred in his sleep. His tiny hand gripped my finger, soft and fierce all at once. I held him close and whispered, "You are mine. You always were, and no one will ever take that from us again." When I returned, I didn't sit back down. I didn't touch the roast cooling in its juices or the wine curdling in its glasses. I picked up my coat. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice steady, my heart pounding like freedom's drum. Behind me, I heard my husband say my name, just my name, but I kept walking. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just stepped out into the night with my son's soft breath against my collarbone, the cool air wrapping me like a verdict. For years I thought strength would come in fire-burning words, shattering plates, dramatic exits that made people gasp. But real strength is quieter. It is the sound of footsteps on the driveway as you leave behind the house where your heart was dismantled piece by piece. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other on my baby's chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing as if it tethered me to the earth. Streetlights passed like witnesses, solemn and unblinking. I kept thinking of all the dinners I had cooked in that house, the candles I had lit, the holidays I had made magical with my own hands, and how easily it had all been poisoned by suspicion, by laughter, by the refusal to see me as anything more than a vessel to be judged. I pulled into my sister's driveway just past midnight. Emma opened the door in her pajamas, hair tangled from sleep, eyes sharp with worry the moment she saw me. "Olivia," she whispered. Then her gaze fell to the baby in my arms. No questions, no accusations, just arms that pulled us both inside. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me without conditions. In the weeks that followed, my husband called. At first every hour, then every day, then less. His voicemail swung wildly between pleading and fury. "Come home, we can fix this. You made me look like a fool. Do you really want to raise him without me?" Each word was another stone thrown at the wall I had finally built around myself. I never answered. I couldn't, because I had finally learned that answering him meant silencing myself. But silence is not peace. There were nights when I lay awake in Emma's guest room, my baby breathing softly beside me, and grief pressed down like a second mattress. I grieved the marriage I thought I had, the family I wanted to believe in, the woman I had been before trust became a luxury. Sometimes I wondered if I had overreacted, if leaving was too final. Then I remembered the way they laughed, the way he laughed, and the weight of that envelope in my hand, heavier than any wedding ring. Divorce papers came eventually, neat little pages that tried to turn 10 years of love and betrayal into lines and signatures. He fought for custody, of course. His lawyer called me unstable, vindictive, manipulative. But when the judge saw the test results, saw the proof I had carried like a shield, saw the timeline of his doubt and neglect, something shifted. I wasn't just a wife who walked away, I was a mother who refused to let her child grow up in a house where trust was conditional. The gavel fell, and with it the last chain that bound me to that family. Sole custody, freedom written in legal ink. I walked out of that courtroom into sunlight so sharp it felt like a new skin. But freedom has its own weight. Bills, sleepless nights, the ache of seeing other families in grocery store aisles laughing without shadows between them. I worked 2 jobs, my hands blistered from cleaning houses during the day and typing reports at night. My body broke, but my spirit stitched itself back together. Because every time my son laughed, every time his little hand reached for mine, I remembered why I chose this path. I would rather drown in exhaustion than live one more day suffocating under their doubt. Months later, I heard through the grapevine that my husband had moved back in with his parents, that he drank more than he worked, that the family dinners were quieter now, as if laughter had turned to ash in their throats. I didn't rejoice in it, not the way I once thought I would. Revenge isn't sweet, not really. It's bitter, sharp, metallic. It doesn't heal the wound, it just stops the bleeding long enough for you to crawl away. One evening, as I watched my son sleep, I realized the truth. What I gave them wasn't just an envelope, it was a mirror, and what they saw inside it destroyed them more than any words I could have spoken. Because the proof they demanded proved nothing about me and everything about them. There are memories I still can't shake, though time has softened their edges. Like the sound of chairs scraping back from that dinner table, not from politeness, but from shame, each of them trying to hide behind the clatter of silverware because truth had stripped them bare. Or the way my husband's voice cracked when he finally realized what I had done, how I had taken his doubt and turned it into a weapon sharp enough to silence a room full of people who had feasted on my humiliation. But life doesn't pause for reflections. After the court ruling, after the dust settled, there was laundry to fold, rent to pay, scraped knees to bandage. My son grew in the shadow of absence, but he grew strong. And so did I. Strength, I learned, isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is waking up at 5 a.m. for a shift you hate, packing lunches with trembling hands, and kissing your child's forehead with a smile even when your heart is exhausted. Every now and then I'd catch my reflection in shop windows, tired eyes, unpolished hair, clothes a little too worn. But beneath it all, I saw something new, a woman who had walked through fire and kept walking. A woman who chose truth over comfort, dignity over belonging. The family I left behind didn't disappear completely. Gossip has a way of slithering through cracks. I'd overhear people whisper that I ruined my marriage, that I humiliated my husband, that I destroyed what could have been saved. And for a while, those whispers cut deep. But then I realized these were the same people who once laughed at me without hesitation. Their opinion was never mine to carry. One day, when my son was about 5, he asked Mommy, "Where's Daddy?" The question froze me. I had rehearsed 1,000 answers in my mind, each one too sharp or too soft. Finally, I knelt in front of him and said, "Daddy made choices that hurt us. But you are loved, you are wanted, and you will never have to prove that to me." His little brow furrowed like he was trying to weigh the heaviness of my words, and then he simply hugged me. Children don't need the whole story, they just need truth scaled down to their size. Years later, when he was old enough to understand more, I gave him the envelope. Not to burden him, but to show him what doubt looks like and what it costs. He read it quietly, his jaw tightening in a way that reminded me of his father. Then he folded it back up and handed it to me. "I don't need this to know who I am," he said. My throat closed around tears I hadn't expected, because in that moment I saw the cycle break. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed, if I had kept swallowing the jokes, the looks, the endless proving. Would I have disappeared piece by piece until nothing of me remained? Would my son have grown up thinking love always comes with conditions? Those questions haunt me, but they also affirm me. Leaving was not just survival, it was teaching my son that respect is non-negotiable. The truth is, betrayal doesn't always look like an affair, a scandal, a secret text message. Sometimes betrayal looks like silence. Like a husband who lets laughter cut into his wife and does nothing to stop it. Like a family that sits at a table and treats cruelty as entertainment. And sometimes revenge is not fire, and fury it is walking away holding your child and never looking back. If you're listening to this and you've been doubted, if you've been mocked, if you've been forced to prove the very things that should have been trusted, you are not alone. Your worth is not in their laughter. Your truth does not need their approval. I don't tell this story for pity or even for justice. I tell it because maybe you too are sitting at a table where the laughter is sharp and the silence is heavier than words. And maybe you need to know that you can stand up, walk away, and still build a life worth living. Because I did. And though it cost me everything I thought I wanted, it gave me everything I truly needed. Freedom, dignity, and the chance to raise my son in a world where love is never a question on a piece of paper. So, if my story has touched you, please share it. Let someone else who needs to hear this find their way here. Subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me your story too. Together we can turn our broken pieces into something strong enough to silence every cruel laugh.